Today's Newsmakers, a Gold Star mom speaks out, terror in Bangladesh, and pro-life leaders' plight. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, actors, and other notable news figures. On today's show, we're diving into an incredibly important topic. We're going to be talking with Christy Shamblin. Her daughter-in-law was killed in the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. She is here to speak out about her family's plight and what she says has been silence from the Biden administration. And so with no further ado, let's welcome Christy to Newsmakers. Christy, I want to thank you for joining me today. I know it has been an incredibly chaotic week, to say the least, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Arlington Cemetery and what happened there. But before we get there, I want to talk about your daughter-in-law, Marine Sergeant Nicole G. I think it's incredibly important we start there. She was lost at Abbey Gate. And just tell us a little bit about her for those who don't know.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Nicole was just a superstar in life. She was spectacular. Her heart and her encouraging attitude were contagious. You didn't meet her and not feel better about yourself, and like all part of life. She was just amazing. She and my son were married in 2016, and they were a Marine Corps couple living in North Carolina. I get some feedback sometimes, and I just want to clear up. Her mama, Becky, passed away in 2019. Otherwise, she would be here singing her praises. But, she unfortunately was waiting for Nicole in heaven. Nicole was known for being an encourager. She set records at gyms. Just a few weeks before she went to Kabul, she was at an air base and set a record there. She's still on the wall for setting a weightlifting record there. She would finish PT and run back to the last person on her team coming in and run in with them as an encouragement. She was always just helping people see that they could be the best version of themselves. And we miss her terribly. Our lives will never be the same as a family. She's got nephews that she was never able to meet. And there's a giant hole in our lives that is never going to be replaced. It doesn't go away. All you do is you learn to live with it. And we don't wish that on anybody.
Well, and I want to dig into that. And, obviously, for those watching and listening, we're talking about Abbey Gate in Afghanistan, the deadly event. And it's been just 3 years. There was just an anniversary event. But this was held at Arlington National Cemetery. It was something for the families to come together and to remember the lives of those lost, including Nicole's. And former President Donald Trump, you invited him there, correct? All of the families together invited him.
Correct. Yes. The Hoover family, Kelly Barnett and Darren Hoover, lay a wreath every year on the tomb of the unknown soldier in honor of their son. And we have joined them now for 3 years, and we'll probably do the same for the rest of our lives as well. So they initially invited President Trump as a friend, to lay the wreath with them. And then as a group, we joined in with that, and we were happy to, host the president there.
It's interesting because there are a couple of things here. There's apparently that part of the cemetery you're not supposed to be taking photos. So there was some commentary about that since photos were taken. Talk a little bit about the event and from your purview, what you felt was happening with his presence there.
It was beautiful and respectful. We made every effort. We worked with Arlington and the president's team to make every effort to make sure there was as few distractions or disruptions at the cemetery as possible. We even considered school groups that were coming through and made sure that, our movement didn't disrupt any of those activities. It was very respectful, very much what we're hoping for our heroes, for our kids, is that they get the respect and the honor that they died earning. And it was beautiful. After we were done with the wreath laying ceremonies, we went to the grave sites, as we do every year on the anniversary. We spend the day there, and President Trump came with us and laid flowers on each of the graves and spoke to the families. He didn't say, I don't think, more than a handful of words. It wasn't a political event. He didn't talk about himself or his campaign there was no talk about him. He listened to our families tell stories about our loved ones. We kept it as short as we could, so that we could clear up the area for, free access to everybody. But we had permission from Arlington. We crossed all our T's and dotted our I's. We respect Arlington just as much as everybody else. Our loved ones are buried there. That's a place I go to be with Nicole. We would never intentionally disrespect or encourage disrespect. And there was none there that day. We didn't see an altercation. It was all respect and love, honestly.
Well, you've had a chance to, just as a final question, you've had a chance to deliver messages directly to former President Trump because, as you said, he's given you the time to do that. If you had Vice President Kamala Harris, who is running against Trump to be commander-in-chief in November, what would you say to her right now? What would your message be if she were in front of you and you finally had that opportunity to speak to her?
I would say, please help us problem solve. Let's make this never happen again, so that the Afghanistan exit doesn't become the next humanitarian rescue that we do. We don't need another Saigon or another Afghanistan. People falling off of planes or being rescued from rooftops isn't the American way, and we need to do better. And it would be great if we could get help from Vice President Harris to make that happen.
Well, Christy, as always, I really appreciate you taking the time and just speaking with us. I know it's not easy to talk about any of these things from Nicole. That's the biggest piece, right down the line. And yet you have joined us repeatedly to do that. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
We'll continue to cover new details in that story as they unfold, and we'll be right back with more Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, we are welcoming Joel Veldkamp. He is the head of international communications for Christian Solidarity International. That's a nonprofit that looks at Christian persecution across the globe. And he's here to join us today with a breakdown of the shocking acts of persecution he says are impacting Christians and other minority groups in Bangladesh. Now, about a month ago, a little over a month ago, the government of Bangladesh was taken down and it fell. And with that came a lot of chaos. And so he is going to break down what is unfolding. Let's welcome Joel to Newsmakers. Joel, it's always good to have you on. And when you come on, you are really always breaking down important issues for us, helping us understand what's happening when it comes to persecution around the globe. There's a story in Bangladesh right now that a lot of people, I am certain, do not know. They have no idea what's happening there. Let's just start from a 30,000-foot view. About a month ago, something pretty shocking happened. Take us through the events there on the ground.
Yeah, about a month ago, after a few weeks of really bloody protests and bloody suppression of protests by the government of Bangladesh was overthrown in essentially a military coup. And what followed was about a week of rioting in which Hindus and Christians and Buddhists all across Bangladesh were attacked by mobs organized by Islamist groups. Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country. It's over 90% Muslim, but it has a long history of secularism and tolerance, and the government had been a secular government, but now that government has been overthrown, and we're extremely concerned that the floodgates are kind of now open for much wider Islamist and jihadist violence against Christians, against Buddhists, against Hindus, against all the non-Muslims in the country.
Yeah, and I know that the Hindu groups, I think it's under 10% of the population, 8% of the population. Christians are less than half of a percentage point, I believe. Yeah, I may low. Have that. So it's very low. But immediately when you have this sort of instability, and I know some of this was led by students at universities, but when you have this kind of instability and you're not sure where your government's heading, it's a terrifying situation. But then having those minority groups suddenly be the target. What are some of the specific stories? Because right now we're seeing a number, not a lot, because actually the media has not necessarily been covering this very intensely. But what we do see are some unconfirmed reports or speculation that churches are being destroyed or homes are being destroyed. Talk a little bit about what you have heard from, you actually have a project partner there who's on the ground.
Yeah, in fact, just 2 days ago, I was able to talk to CSI's main project partner in Bangladesh. He's no longer in Bangladesh. He's in a third country. He had to flee for his life, basically. About 5 days after the military coup, a large group of Islamic extremists came to his house. They were carrying swords, they were carrying guns, and they threatened him and his wife. And they said, this is going to be a 100% Muslim country from now on. There's no room for Hindus, there's no room for Christians. You have to leave. And so he left. He said that as he left, he saw that other Christian homes in his neighborhood had been marked with crosses by the extremists so that everyone could tell who was a Christian and who was a potential target. So now he's out of the country. I'm very grateful that we got to talk to him because he was really in a very dangerous situation, fleeing on foot, not a lot of money on hand. But thankfully he's safe now and he's trying to reestablish contact with his partners in the country. But we know hundreds of Hindu temples across Bangladesh were attacked, dozens of churches. In the region of Dhaka, the capital city of Bangladesh, all of the Christian schools have had to shut down because these extremists have been making threats, telling teachers they have to wear the hijab, the veil that women are required to wear in Islamic law. Even girl students, young girls were threatened, saying you have to wear the hijab. So it's an extremely worrisome atmosphere right now.
It's just unimaginable. Another situation, globally that is just horrific. How has this affect, and will it affect Christian Solidarity International's work there in the region?
Yeah, it's already much harder than it was a month ago. We are responding to the crisis. We're bringing medical aid and food to Christian families who are forced to flee their homes in the countryside of Bangladesh, in some of the villages. But yeah, at the moment, the network that we rely on to bring aid to Christians in Bangladesh is a bit scattered, a bit, in disarray. But I'm also encouraged to see that for a long time, a lot of our work in Bangladesh and other countries in Southeast Asia was capacity building. We were doing workshops for pastors. We were trying to educate Christian leaders about human rights and how to advocate for themselves, how to work together. And we're seeing this network come to life now. People who maybe met each other at a workshop that CSI was able to fund are now calling each other, exchanging information, exchanging tips on where to go to be safe, how to get aid. So that's one thing that I'm really encouraged by in the current crisis.
Well, Joel, I appreciate you and Christian Solidarity International, the work that you do, and for helping break this down so that people can be praying there for Bangladesh and for peace and for stability and for sanity in the midst of all of this. Appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you, Billy.
You can get more information on the crisis in Bangladesh. You can go to csi-usa.org and be sure to be praying for Christians and other minority groups trapped amid the chaos there in Bangladesh. This is Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we sat down with Erin Van Natta. She's a reporter with the Daily Caller, and she's here to explore another important issue surrounding claims that the Biden administration is targeting pro-life protesters. Let's hear what she has to say. Let's welcome Erin here to Newsmakers. Erin, you had a really interesting piece over at the Daily Caller, and this was something that caught my eye for a variety of reasons, but we've been hearing a lot about the FACE Act. This is something that I think a lot of Americans might not have much of an idea about. They may not know much about it, and yet it's being used increasingly so, particularly when it comes to pro-lifers who are protesting at abortion clinics. Can you tell us a little bit about the FACE Act and what it is? Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So the FACE Act stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It was instituted in 1994 under the Clinton administration. And if you go to the DOJ's website, its stated purpose is to protect access to reproductive health, which is a euphemism for abortion, but that's the language they use. However, it also extends toward pro-life pregnancy resource centers, as well as houses of worship, so churches, for example. And if you go on the DOJ's website, you'll notice that they say the FACE Act extends to houses of worship because the right to assemble, freedom of religion, that's protected by the First Amendment. So the FACE Act is supposed to apply to pro-life counseling and churches, other houses of worship. However, what pro-lifers and conservatives have long claimed is that actually this act is really just a cudgel that's being used to target pro-life activists. And for the longest time, we didn't have the data to really substantiate that. And now we do. And this is the first time it's been published.
Well, and, looking into that data, which is what you had a chance to do, and in light of those claims that you just mentioned, what exactly did you find? What did you discover? And what were you thinking and feeling as you were sort of navigating that data?
Yeah, so this data is from the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and it was obtained by Chip Roy's office, and it was provided to the caller. And the data shows there are approximately 211 cases, and around 97% of those cases were targeted at pro-life or anti-abortion activists. So people who are demonstrating at an abortion clinic, exercising their right to protest. Of course, I should note there are definitely cases in where people commit crimes other than violating the FACE Act, for example, making a violent threat. So there are certainly instances, and I'll touch on that later. But what's notable is that particularly under the Biden administration, prosecutions ramped up dramatically. So the Biden's DOJ is responsible for over a quarter of all FACE Act prosecutions in the law's 30-year history, which is pretty significant. And he's also responsible for about 24% of the cases targeting pro-life activists. So in 2023, there are 5 people who did attack pro-life resource centers, and they were charged under the FACE Act. However, that's 5 activists out of all of the hundreds of cases of churches being vandalized, and arson attacks, pro-life pregnancy centers being targeted. So the prosecutions are wildly leaning towards one side, targeting one side of the abortion debate. And then another thing. Can I just
ask you one? I wanted to ask you one thing there. I just wanted to pause there for a minute because this is interesting to me because the critics will say, oh, well, it's because the pro-lifers are out there and they're protesting more and there's more of these events. But you just mentioned something important. And this was something that was not getting a lot of attention outside of conservative and faith-based media, which is that when the Dobbs decision leaked before the overturning of Roe, there started to be these attacks on churches. How many, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, how many of those attacks do you think there were on churches and pregnancy centers during maybe the last 2 years?
Yeah, so Catholic Vote, they're an organization who's done a lot of, they track these attacks. And I think from May 2022, there were about 400 attacks on churches, Catholic churches specifically. So that's not even including other denominations. And then on pro-life pregnancy resource centers, over 90 attacks. And it's also important to note that the data they gathered was collected from people at these resource centers reporting attacks. And there are probably a lot of people who didn't report instances of vandalism just because they didn't want to draw attention to their clinic. So I would say those are probably conservative numbers. But like I mentioned previously, only 5 people under Biden's DOJ who have attacked pro-life pregnancy centers have actually been charged under the FACE Act. So it's, there's definitely an imbalance there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For you as somebody, working as a journalist coming into this, pulling this data together and hearing for so long what the accusations, the claims were, seeing these cases unfold. But now having that data, what's sort of going through your heart and your mind as a journalist, but also as a human being, as you're looking at this and seeing the sentences that some of these individuals, particularly the elderly individuals who, maybe they blocked an entrance, but they were praying, they weren't violent. What do you make of this? How do you process it?
I went to it with an open mind because I know that obviously I have my own bias with regards to the abortion issue and what Biden's DOJ is doing, but I went into it with an open mind. I thought, well, maybe pro-life activism has really ramped up. Maybe there are increased instances of aggression and violent threats, and that's not what I discovered. So it's certainly concerning that such a powerful institution as the federal government is being weaponized in such a way. I mean, I mentioned Paul Vaughn. His home was raided by FBI agents, and thankfully he escaped jail time. But it's incredibly concerning that we live in a free country where the feds can just barge in on someone's door and arrest them for exercising their First Amendment rights. So it is concerning, but I don't want to leave your listeners feeling, frightened or scared of the future in America. It actually gives me hope that we were able to obtain this data and publish it for the public to see. And once you have that knowledge, you can be empowered to do something about that and make change.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you breaking down the data and looking at this and helping us better understand the issue. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This is yet another story that we will continue to cover as new details unfold. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews that you watched on today's episode. And if you're a fan of podcasts, be sure to head over to your favorite podcast platform. Over there, you can listen to our daily Newsmakers podcast. We feature one full interview every single day. So be sure to subscribe and rate that podcast today on your favorite platform. As for this show, we'll see you again next